Welcome back to the Science of Happier Work with Happiness Means Business. I'm one of two managing partners at Happiness Means Business. My name's Jackson Kirchis, and I'll be hosting today. So what we're going to talk about, you may have seen the title of this episode or heard the title of this episode, is Resolutions and Changes to Be Happier at Work. So what this is really about, maybe this would have been a better fit for the first week of January, but I tend to think in the new year, a lot of times we may think something to the effect of, I want to be happier at work. And we probably don't use that language. We might say, I want to enjoy my work a little more. I want to reduce my stress, or I want to have better work-life balance. All of these things are kind of under this umbrella that Paul and I talk about of happiness at work and happier work, and how ultimately that fuels performance. So I thought in this episode, I would get into a practical model of how to actually enjoy your work more, be happier at work, get better work-life balance, etc. And the reason that I say it applies to all of those different things is because there's really an essential principle or an essential mechanism underlying all of those things, which is, how do we change behavior? How do we go from knowing to doing? Because when it comes to enjoying work more, I think maybe 80% of the time we tend to know what we should do, don't we? So it's like, I need to manage my stress better. I need to just feel more engaged and energized at work. I need to make better relationships with some of my colleagues. I need to leave the office earlier, whatever. All these different things. And the question usually is like, well, how do I actually get myself to do those things consistently? Because if it's February 8th by now, if you're like probably 90% of people out there that have New Year's resolutions, many of them are maybe not going according to plan. So I'm going to teach in this video a simple model for behavior change, and then I'll introduce 2 or 3 habits that I might suggest that you begin to implement as you think about optimizing your experience at work. So how do we change behavior? So I'm going to share with you an acronym that I find very helpful, and that's MAP. It's kind of like a map, right? What does a map do? It gets you from where you are to where you want to go. So the M means motivation, A means action, and P means proof. And what you have with this model is it creates what I call a positive spiral or positive feedback loop that leads to sustained behavior change. So the M is motivation. And now, importantly, I often say when I'm giving talks or I'm training leaders, I say, I am not a motivational speaker. I'm a behavioral speaker, because I'm not just here to inspire you and pump you up and get you excited, and then 2 weeks later, nothing happens. I'm here to help you take some initial motivation and then engineer new behaviors that actually last, because that ultimately is what changes your results and changes your quality of life. So the M is motivation, though, because motivation is still essential. We need some motivation to do the things that we set out to do. And the first point when it comes to motivation is it needs to have a relationship to our identity, how we see ourselves. And the reason for this is that behaviors that are incongruent with the self do not last. So here's a really simple example. Think about this. Someone offers me a cigarette and I say, no, thanks, I'm not a smoker. Or I say, I'm trying to get a little better about that. I think I'm good. Or maybe someone offers me a piece of chocolate cake or some ice cream. And I say, I don't eat that. Or I say, oh man, I'm really trying to eat a little healthier right now. You get the idea. So the first one is, I see myself, my identity, as I am not a smoker. I do not eat this way. I sometimes say I am statements are some of the most powerful statements we can make. And, I think back about a story of a friend of mine in college. So he was in high school, I think he was a state champion, a really high level swimmer, very competitive league, would be 2 hours in the pool every morning at like 5 a.m. And when he was in college, he was struggling to get back in shape. And I thought, just from like a psychological perspective, this is incredibly interesting. How is it that this guy that could get in the water every day at 5 a.m., freezing cold, swim for 2 hours, and now he's struggling to go to the gym for 30 minutes? Like, how does that work? And I realized that a lot of it had to do with language and perceptions. So he would say things like, and he's now a college student at this time, he'd be like, yeah, I kind of need to get in shape again, or yeah, I should probably start working out a little more. Now, in high school, what do you think his identity was? Well, he was an athlete. So for a college student who wants to maybe get in shape, it's kind of maybe acceptable to not prioritize exercise. For an athlete, an elite competitive athlete, there's no question. It's like you're going to get up and you're going to go to the gym. So I hope that doesn't sound too cliche, but I think it's really important that you tie it to an identity in a way that's emotionally compelling for you. I mean, at the last retreat, I was talking about this little exercise I was doing with one of the participants who military commander, and he said, yeah, I want to, when I come home from work, a lot of times I'm carrying stress with me. So the habit that I want to work on is when I walk into the door, I will generate some positive emotion that spreads through the family. So maybe I go give my daughter a kiss, or give her a hug, or go greet my wife, or give her a compliment or something. And we were talking about the motivation and how it relates to your identity. And I'm just like, who do you want to be? You've told me earlier that you want to be a father, you want to take care of your family, you want to be an example for them. And I said, so what are the consequences if you do not do this? If you do not live up to the identity you claim, what are the consequences? 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when you don't have a quality relationship with your children and you have failed to be an example of the type of person you want them to become. And it's like, you can feel how that changed, can't you? Just talking about it. Like, that was a little more intense, wasn't it? And I didn't do it to obviously like hurt this guy. We were talking through it. But you can see how when you take what is some sort of habit or saying, I want to be better at this, and you actually start to tie it to emotional consequences that deal with your core identity and how you see yourself and what you value, there's a whole lot more juice, isn't there, just now, than to say, oh yeah, I think when I come home, I want to be more positive, to tying that thread to say, do you want to be the type of parent that your children look up to and respect? So this first piece, where does motivation come from? It is finding a why that relates to your identity, and you have some emotional congruence. And now I'm going to give you a final science-based protocol to help you foster further this motivation. I found this really interesting. It was part of a toolkit by Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist at Stanford, and he drew on a couple primary research studies. I don't have the citations in front of me, but I thought it was interesting. What research has found in the scientific literature is that if you already have some motivation, it is most helpful to do positive visualization. If you're just totally lacking motivation, it actually helps to do negative visualization. So what do I mean by this? So the positive one is, let's say I'm trying to get a little better at managing my calendar. Let's say that's a common habit. And I'm feeling pretty motivated, but then I've got to sit down and it's like, hey, this is my 1 hour a week where I try to organize all my tasks and get on my calendar, and I'm ready to do it, but it's maybe not great. That's where you might do some positive visualization. So you're going to think through in the future state, how will it feel when you're done? What are the positive benefits of accomplishing that task, right? Kind of embodying, stepping into how will it feel to have accomplished this and stuck with your stated behavior. So you say, wow, that will be nice to have my week just planned out. I don't even have to think about it. Everything's organized. I'm being more effective. I've got better balance. Like, this is nice. The flip side of that is if you're just feeling like zero motivation, I'm just like, oh, I can't even deal with this right now. I don't want to do it. That's where some negative visualization comes in. So what are the consequences of, we'll just run with that same example, of not getting your calendar organized? Well, if I don't do this, what's going to slip through the cracks? I mean, is it going to be an important meeting with my boss that was the one thing away from me getting promoted? Was it going to be that my son's soccer game that I was supposed to go to? Was it going to be that follow-up conversation on a really important sale that I've been working on? And I mean, what are the consequences to a few months out, a year out of missing this time and be scrambling? And I'm always up my head like, do I have to do this? Do I have to do this? Should I be? and I have no idea what's going on, and I'm so much stress and frustration and missed opportunity. And that's negative visualization. So we begin with anchoring this to a kind of a core emotional identity and set of values. Even if your behavior, and I think it's important to point out, even if you're watching this video and you're thinking, oh, there's maybe a small behavior I'd like to improve or something, or I want to leave the office a few minutes earlier, get a little better work-life balance, you can still tie it to a really important statement of identity about who you want to be, how you want to show up in the world, what you value, and then, of course, supplementing that with the positive and negative visualizations. So that is the first piece. Now, how do we start to create a cycle around that? Well, it's the next two steps. I said map, meaning motivation, and then action and proof. So I sometimes phrase this as you want to choose who you want to become and then prove it to yourself with repeated actions. So every behavior, you're sort of casting a vote for who you want to become. So I'll say it one more time. You have to choose who you want to become and then prove it to yourself with your actions. And this is actually grounded in the psychological theory of self-efficacy. So self-efficacy was pioneered by a gentleman named, last name Bandura, as a psychologist. I don't remember his first name. I think it was Albert. But he started to look at this, and you start to see it's this kind of this capacity to follow through on what you say you are going to do. So if you have low self-efficacy, it may be you just tend to not follow through on things generally, or in a specific domain. If someone said, hey, Jackson, you're going to take over as the CEO of Delta Airlines or the COO, I'd have pretty low self-efficacy because I have no effing idea how to do this. Now, if you generally have good systems in place to maintain discipline and stay organized and do the things you commit to doing, you could be said to have, broadly speaking, high levels of self-efficacy, and of course in a specific domain. If every day I run 5 miles, when it comes to cardiovascular fitness and exercise, I have pretty high self-efficacy. Now, the interesting thing is here is that self-efficacy, right, requires some level of proof. So essentially, if we commit to doing a behavior and then we follow through on doing the behavior, that bolsters our self-efficacy. So that's where the A and the P come together. Is we said, who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? I kind of clear on this identity and I have emotional motivation. Now I need to tie whatever this goal or outcome or thing I'm after, this behavior set is, to some repeating action. And as I do that, it's creating proof that I am following through on becoming the type of person I set out to be. Then that increases self-efficacy, and then that increases your identity and motivation, and it creates this cycle. So I drew this before I started this video. I don't know how well you'll be able to see it on the video. So you say, I have my identity, my motivation, my intention about the behavior set or the outcome, and then I actually take one small action, and that creates proof. That's evidence, which then shows, oh, I said I was going to become this and do this. I did it. I have proof. I've just increased my self-efficacy, which is my capacity to follow through on the thing. Then that reinforces my identity, my motivation, my intention, which makes me more likely to take action, which leads to more proof, to more self-efficacy, to more motivation, and boom, boom, boom. That's why I call it a positive spiral. So behavior change is not it's on one hand, it is a very complex science. But on another hand, it's really simple as saying, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's who I want to be with an emotionally compelling reason. Now, how can I prove it to myself with small actions? So if you're thinking about something here, or you have something in mind, right, the next step is to create appointments or create recurring behaviors. So it may be if I want to say, I really want to get better at managing my stress, and I have really strong reasons about how I want to be in terms of as a father or a mother, as a spouse or as a partner, as a manager, as a leader. Like I'm really clear I want to do it. Well, that's not enough. It's not even close. What's the action? I don't know. It could be once a week you go get a massage. It could be every day you spend 10 minutes doing a breathing exercise that helps you to relax. It could be you end every meeting by smiling and saying thank you. I don't know, but how do you operationalize it into an action and then prove it to yourself by following through on that action repeatedly. And that's going to create this spiraling effect. Because remember, it's important to not just focus on the outputs, but what are the inputs or the systems to get there. So once again, I want better work-life balance. Well, you and everyone else, if you have good reasons for it and your motivation to do it, and you visualize what's at stake if you do or don't, well, what are the tangible actions? Okay, well, I need to set up a weekly review to organize my calendar. I need to turn my phone or my work email on Do Not Disturb every day at 5:30 p.m. I need to time block the most important activities each week for work and for personal life so that I know they're taken care of, and then fill in everything else. There are all these different applications. The important part is you have some tangible action that you can do repeatedly to create that proof, and then you get that map cycle. So why don't I share with you a couple examples of how you could apply this, and I think that'll make this somewhat abstract or theoretical learning about behavior change a bit more practical. I'm going to suggest 3 potential what I might call pillar habits or key habits for happier work. The first is meditation or mindfulness. The second is more rest breaks. And the third is exercise snacks. So I do not recommend you do all 3, but that you consider doing one of these if you can't think of anything. So the first I said is meditation. So that's just doing something each day that helps you to cultivate your awareness or be more mindful. It could be specifically to reduce stress, or it could just be to say, hey, I want to kind of train my ability to be present, or sometimes I say it, to be where your feet are. So a simple one you may consider, this has been shown by research again at Stanford to be one of the most effective interventions for reducing overall generalized anxiety levels, is a physiological sigh, is the style of breathing, or you may think of it as a meditation, although it's really a breathing exercise. But it's the same mechanism as meditation because it's helping you to ground and come back to the present moment. And they did a study looking at this versus standard meditation and versus those who did nothing. Standard meditation being something to the effect of, hey, just sit and try to pay attention to your breathing or something. And you don't control the breathing, just sit and pay attention. And what they found is that people who practiced this form showed, again, much greater reductions in generalized anxiety and some other measures associated with stress. So what this looks like is you spend 5 to 10 minutes each morning breathing in a certain way. And the way that you can breathe looks like this. So you're going to breathe in at the top of your inhale. You can take another second inhale and then control your sigh coming out. I'm not going to explain all of the biomechanical mechanisms behind that, but the main idea here is that you get that double inhale. Don't have to do it every time, but ideally you will. That helps to inflate your lungs. And then that slow and controlled exhale that is longer than your inhale, ideally a few seconds longer, produces a down-regulating effect in the nervous system. So when you go, it's kind of like when you sit down on the couch and you're like, that's actually telling your nervous system to calm down. So how would you do this? Well, again, you would tie it. I won't spend too much time in the letter M, but you find your motivation. Why is it important that you manage your stress levels? How do you want to show up for people, etc.? Then your action might be 10 minutes every morning. And then, of course, you follow through on that. You make an appointment with yourself. You do it consistently. That bolsters your self-efficacy, and you're better able to follow through and manage your stress, not just in this context, but in all areas. Another one to consider is 10-minute rest breaks during or after meetings. I thought this study was really interesting. It was from Microsoft, actually. They had like 14 of their employees wear EEGs all day, which if you've ever seen all the wires that are connecting to someone's head and they're dangling down to a machine, it's one of those. So it's kind of like a brain scan. Not the most scientific explanation because brain scans actually use imaging technology, which an EEG doesn't, but you get the idea. You're monitoring people's brain activity. And they had one group do like 4 hours of 30-minute meetings back. And then they had another group do the same thing, changing topics in every meeting, but you did a 10-minute break between each meeting and did a short meditation. And they found that 3 key things that people in that group that had the 10-minute breaks it helped to reduce the buildup of stress. So it was almost like a reset that diminished the accumulation of stress throughout the day. Another interesting thing is that you have increased ability to focus and engage when you have the breaks. Those in the back to back to back to back to back had decreased cognitive performance. And then finally, they found that those transitions can be a source of high stress. So that kind of people who didn't have breaks, those little windows where you're like back to back in the meetings, you're trying to wrap up the current one and then get into the new one, caused kind of peaks in exaggerated or heightened stress levels. So there's another potential implementation you can consider is adding in 5 to 10 minute breaks in between your meetings. So again, you say, why is that important? What are the consequences, etc.? And then you make a commitment that maybe even adds in, you can change your, it's an interesting hack. In a lot of programs like Outlook, etc., you can change your default meeting time to say 25 minutes. And so that break is automatically built in. A third one to consider is what's called an exercise snack. I thought this was an interesting name, certainly. I won't go too far into the research literature, but it essentially suggests that breaking up your day with even small bouts of exercise, like a 10-minute jog, or sorry, a 1-minute jog up a flight of stairs, or even just soleus push-ups, also known as calf raises, sustained throughout the day, or even things like there's a Stanford researcher named Dr. BJ Fogg who talks about sometimes a tiny habit like after I use the restroom, I will do 10 push-ups. All of these things can have material effects on our health and metabolism. Even our NEAT, which stands for non-exercise induced thermogenesis, very technical word, but it's basically just means how many calories is your body burning when you're not exercising, just your default state. These things somewhat small, but again, just increasing our non-exercise related movement throughout the day can help to promote just overall health, as well as, of course, kind of the almost simulate longer bouts of exercise. So, of course, traditional long bouts of exercise, you want to aim for about 150 minutes of cardio per week, as well as some resistance training and mobility work is optimal, but you can easily layer in these little snacks, which are going to help you feel more energized, more well-rested, and improve just your overall health. So a few ways you can action that. Say, why is this important? Of course, the motivation. But then you start to think, okay, well, maybe then it's that BJ Fogg recipe of after blank, I will blank. So after I end a meeting, I will stretch for 30 seconds at my desk. After I use the restroom, I will do 10 push-ups. After I refill my cup of coffee, I will do one jog up the flight of stairs, whatever. You can start to see how you can layer these in to just break up your day. And as I've heard some people say, sitting is the new smoking. So these can help you again to just be a little bit more active throughout the day without taking up a ton of your time. So in this video or in slash podcast, depending on how you're watching it, my hope is that at the end here, I've stimulated some food for thought. What are a few very, very simple and easy key habits that can have a fairly profound effect on your quality of work or your quality of working life? Of course, those being mindfulness as an option, rest as an option, and exercise snacks as an option. But then I hope more broadly speaking, at the beginning of the video, you have digested this kind of map model, which means, okay, if I want to actually follow through on a resolution or a commitment, whether it's at work or otherwise, I need to have some motivation, which means tying it to how I see myself, my core values, my identity, and it needs to be emotionally compelling. And then I need to make that into tangible actions, set an appointment with myself, set a date with myself. What does it actually look like to operationalize it into behavioral terms? And then you do those actions to create proof that you are in fact following through on what you said you were going to do. And that reinforces your motivation and your identity and your intention, which then leads to more action and more proof and more self-efficacy. And you have this wonderful upward spiral and compounding effect. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. We always on this show sometimes have guests, sometimes go in depth on research, sometimes just more general like this. But really what the common thread is that we want to get you practical tools to be happier at work. And that's grounded in an understanding that when you are showing up at your best in work, you're going to not only enjoy it more, but perform better as an individual, and the teams that you lead or that you work in, or even organizations as a whole, are going to perform better as well when their people are flourishing. So that's all for now. I'll see you back here in a few weeks. Thanks for watching or for listening, and have a wonderful day.